Hi everyone, welcome to CoC Live. We will get started in a couple of minutes when Ammaarah from Adia Muslim Abortion Collective is going to be joining tonight. So tonight's topic, we're going to be talking about abortion in Muslim communities, and I think she's just joined. I'll just get her to invite her. Fingers crossed that's worked. We did have technical issues last time. Hi!
Hey, how are you?
Good, thank you. I love how nice and easy that was. Like, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. And yourself?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Thanks so much for joining tonight. And it's such an important topic, and I absolutely can't wait to hear about all your work. And I'm sure a lot of people who are going to be watching can't wait as well. So, just an introduction to Community of Cultures first for anyone who hasn't watched our videos before or they're not familiar with what we do. We're a project that was set up by Sheffield Maternity Cooperative, and what we do is we're a national project that supports people and families from Black communities, Asian communities, and ethnic communities through various aspects of the reproductive journey. So we look at fertility and pregnancy and loss and abortion, and also into early parenthood as well. So that's what we do, and we're going to be talking tonight on our Instagram live series where I do a series of chats with special guests about different topics. And tonight we are talking about abortion, and specifically abortion for people from Muslim communities. So I'm going to welcome Ammaarah from Adia, a Muslim Abortion Collective. Thank you so much for joining. How are you? Just give us what are you bringing to this space tonight? Oh, I couldn't hear you.
Oh,
There's a little issue with the sound. I don't know whether it's.
oh. Let me on with my up.
No,
Okay.
I'm getting you in bits. While we're waiting for Amara to come back, I'm just
Is
going
that
to
any
give a
better?
quick overview. Yes, so much better. Um, I'm just going to give a quick overview as to why we've chosen to talk about this topic at COC Live. In June, we had the overturning of Roe versus Wade, which is basically ending the constitutional right to an abortion for millions of people in the US. And so abortion has been a big topic that has been going on around the world at the moment anyway, but also it is a big topic that still holds, I feel, a lot of stigma in some communities. So it's something that's really important to talk about, and particularly really interested in the work that you're bringing forward as well. So we'll just go back to you, and yeah, what vibes are you bringing to this space tonight?
Yeah, good vibes, positive vibes for me today. We had our first kind of community space yesterday, and it was really beautiful, really nourishing. So I'm just feeling very positive and grateful to be here today.
That is great, fantastic. So we recently had a live session about doulas, but doulas in general. But not everyone might be aware that actually there are abortion doulas as well. So can you tell us a bit about what an abortion doula does?
Yeah, definitely. So I think being a doula or doulas are quite a historic concept, like they've been around for a really long time. And I think in recent years, as people have kind of come to realize that Western medicine is really not that holistic, there's been a lot more conversations about doulas and having doulas support you at various stages in your life. And I guess for me, and for a number of people, doula kind of probably means different things. And I kind of think of doulas as a person who supports you as you're going through a period of change or a period of transition in your life. And some of the big kind of periods of change that people might go through are birth, life, like big life changes, things like abortion, potentially miscarriage, or any other pregnancy outcome or pregnancy ending, as well as things like death as well. People may also have a doula support them as they're coming to kind of the end of their life and kind of more palliative care formats. And I guess for me, like, doula work is something that is therefore really full spectrum. So it's something that is with you throughout the various different journeys and different types of change you might experience in your life. And doula work is also something that is quite specific. It's quite specific to the person and the kind of care that they offer. So when looking specifically at abortion work, an abortion doula might be someone who speaks to you beforehand, who provides you with emotional support if you're considering getting an abortion, if you're thinking that abortion might be the right choice for you. Depending on the kind of clinic setup or the appointment that you have to go to, they might be someone who can accompany you, or they might be someone who offers support post-abortion, like myself. And this can be individually, so kind of one-to-one sessions or one-to-one calls or contact to check how you're doing. It can be practical support. So a lot of the time doulas might help with things like childcare, making sure that you've got enough food, making sure that you're being taken care of in a postpartum state. Or it can be doing things like running groups like I do, very much kind of dependent on that individual, how they feel they can support their community and offer the best kind of care in that way. And I think the only other thing to say is that the word doula is something that is currently up for debate in a lot of spaces. It's not necessarily something that everyone feels comfortable using. It's a Greek word, or an ancient Greek word, that means slave. And because doula work is historically something that has predominantly been done by Black people, by Indigenous people, and by brown people, for a lot of us, maybe it's not the most comfortable word to necessarily use to describe our practice. So sometimes I will hear people who maybe would be considered as doulas also refer to themselves as abortion support people, or as one of my mentors once referred to it, as an abortion support friend, a stand-in friend, I think is another really good way to look at it.
That's really interesting. I wasn't aware of that, actually. Yeah, that is really interesting, the language and the context around that. But thanks for sharing about that. So, I mean, Adia, or Adeya, you told me it's pronounced in different ways. Why did you set it up, and what does your organisation do?
Oof, I think that is a very difficult question to answer concisely. In short, I think Adeya is an online community really that offers support and spaces for Muslim people to come together at any stage of their abortion journey. So this can be after abortion, to kind of share your abortion stories, or to join our spaces and talk about what abortion might look like for you if you find yourself pregnant and are thinking that might be a good option. At the moment, we run groups every month. The first Sunday of every month, and we host this kind of free online space for people to come together and talk about abortion with this kind of spiritual perspective, bringing our faith into it, because as Muslims, our faith is not really something that you can separate from any part of our identity, let alone, as we're going through kind of periods of change. And Adeya obviously is UK based, because I am, but it is an international community, which is really beautiful to see, which means that we have Muslims who join us from all over the world, who access abortion in a number of different ways, in places where it's legal, where it is safe, in places where it's not, where it's inaccessible, where it could potentially be criminalized. And Adeya spaces are continuously dedicated to being expansive, both in their perception of abortion and also in Islam. We're a Black-led, Black-founded organisation as well that tries to incorporate reproductive justice into everything that we do. And I guess the reason I started Adeya is because I struggle to see myself and the various communities that I belong to represented in abortion spaces and in reproductive rights as a whole. I have been involved in reproductive rights for a really long time. My background is gender and racial justice and sexual health. And I've never really seen Muslim people occupy space or take up space. I've never seen their voices centered. And particularly with some of the things that have happened recently, with some of the conversations that we've been having about abortion rights, I've never seen Muslim voices listened to, or people make space for us. And I guess in a moment of frustration that there was no space for us, I thought, okay, maybe someone has to create that space, and maybe I can be that person who starts the beginnings of that space and hopefully builds it into this kind of community as well.
That is amazing. Yeah, representation, I always say on these chats that it's so important. We were talking about it when we were talking about doulas as well, on our last live. It's just so important for people to see someone that they identify with, and to hear from people in their community, because it kind of makes you feel like you're not alone, and other people, it's okay to talk about things. It's okay to have certain feelings or feel certain things or experience different things. And abortion is such a big thing. I mean, I come from a South Asian background, and it is quite a stigma in my communities as well. And often I find, people don't know where to go to talk about it. It's not talked about. And so that's why I'm so in admiration of what you've done and brought this space, this safe space, because people are going through it. There are people all over the world who are going through it, and this will make them feel less alone. What do you think are the greatest challenges or barriers facing those going through abortion in Muslim communities?
Again, I think it's a number of kind of issues. I would say definitely here in the UK, it's probably access to abortion. Like we live in a in a nation state where abortion is something that you can access up to 24 weeks, right? And providing you have 2 doctor signatures, it's not something that you'd be criminalized for. However, looking beyond just the kind of legality of abortion, we have to ask ourselves how accessible abortion actually is. And I think being Muslim, at least in the UK, kind of comes with a number of other experiences of oppression as well. Like a significant number of Muslims in this country are black or brown or racially minoritized people. A lot of Muslims as well will also, and are probably more likely to, experience poverty in their lifetime. There was a study that came out recently with the National Zakat Foundation that spoke about how Muslims fall into poverty at a rate 10 times higher than the national average. And all of these different things, I think, impact the way that we access abortion and healthcare as a whole. Whilst it might be legal, how are you going to get the abortion care that you deserve if you are someone who experiences medical racism, if you're someone who historically has not had good health outcomes in your community, or just on a practical level, if you're someone who is, not able to have paid time off work, if you're not able to have that postpartum care that you deserve, how is your abortion experience going to be different? And are you going to be disadvantaged as a result of the structures of oppression that are around us? I also think the stigma piece is massive. I think, like for me, it's really important to recognize that stigma is not something that belongs to racialized communities or Muslim communities. Like all of us consistently have to challenge abortion stigma. It's a societal issue. But I think this kind of fear, often of Islamophobia or anti-Muslim bigotry, however you'd like to describe it, compounds with abortion stigma. So even in spaces where you are supposedly tackling stigma, it doesn't still feel safe for someone who is Muslim, for someone who is LGBTQ+, for someone who is racialized in kind of any way. And I think that is also a really big challenge, is that even within safe spaces, oftentimes marginalized and minoritized people still don't really feel safe. And I think the final thing for me, the big kind of challenge or barrier that I think a lot of Muslim people face when it comes to accessing abortion is just kind of about the information that is out there. There are lots of schools of thought in Islam about abortion, and I think for me it's not really about changing those schools of thought necessarily. It's more kind of reminding people of what the Quran says, and that as Muslims in the Quran we have a right to bodily autonomy. It's something that we're told to fight for. But I think that, there has been a lot of kind of conflation of what the Quran says and what interpretations of the Quran say, for example, whether that is through things like colonialism, whether that is through conflation of, in the States, for example, what evangelical rhetoric says about abortion, and what is actually like Islamic thought about it. There's a lot of confusion, and I think that the way that gets filtered down into the community is quite scary. Like, it triggers a lot of fear mongering. It makes people feel really unsafe, and they're therefore accessing information that is incorrect. And makes their experience of abortion something that maybe is physically safe but potentially not mentally safe, as well.
And talking about sort of those messages filtering through, how how can we get these, I guess, the correct context and the correct messages going out? Well, I guess that's something you're doing with Adia, but what are your plans for how to filter these messages out to people?
I think honestly, people just need to, we just as a community, and particularly as Muslims, maybe who come from positions of more privilege, who have been taught, who have this kind of language in their vocabulary already to talk about abortion, we just need to talk about this more. We need to have those brave conversations, and talk about abortion with the people around us. I think we also need to talk about abortion in its wider context. A lot of people see abortion as a human rights issue, and like a solely one type of human right, whereas actually we as Muslims, as racialized people, can link abortion access to things like racist policing, to things like border control, to all of these other issues that are interconnected in our experiences as Muslims. And also what we're kind of compelled to believe in the faith, that we're meant to be fighting against all forms of oppression, and not giving people access to their bodily autonomy is a form of oppression as well. I think you people also need kind of clarity on what the Quran says, and real clarity, particularly when you're thinking about things like abortion bans, on how that contradicts the faith completely. That's not to say that people should or shouldn't get abortions, but that someone else making that choice for you contradicts what the Quran tells us to do, really. We're always, we're encouraged to make choices for ourselves, to seek the advice of people around us, to seek the advice of people in the Muslim community, and then make the decisions that feel good for us, rather than a nation state doing it, taking all the choice and the authority for us. And I think as well, we just need more people in the community, like a diversity of people, of Muslims that we can speak to about these issues. I think many people will say that their mosque is a safe space for them, and many people also will not. Many people will experience things like homophobia or transphobia or misogyny in mosque spaces, for example. And whilst we might say, oh yeah, speak to a scholar or speak to an imam, it's also important for us to recognize that certain power hierarchies might make that really, really difficult. So we need more kind of community members, community leaders, to be there speaking about abortion, who come in all types of different shapes and sizes. So who are not, for example, just cisgender men, but actually are women, are gender non-conforming people, are people of all different races and abilities as well, so that we're not kind of viewing Muslim identity as something that's monolithic, so that all these different types of Muslims who might access abortion care see themselves in the people that they're asking for support as well.
Yeah, definitely. And there is something about bringing things back down to that community level where I remember, so I'm Sikh, so I was going to do some work in the Gurdwara, but like some people found that it was a safe place for them, but some people found it wasn't the right place for them to access particular support or advice about pregnancy and things. They wanted things to be more in the community, and community based, where it was more of a neutral space. So I think I'm feeling the similar sort of vibes from what you're saying as well. So obviously, I said at the beginning the overturning of Roe versus Wade, which happened back in June. How has that impacted you and your work?
I think the overturning of Roe v. Wade has generated a lot of conversation about abortion again. And it's weird because for people who maybe work in reproductive rights or organize in reproductive rights, we're having these conversations all the time. I think there's been a lot more talk in kind of mainstream discourse about abortion and abortion rights. And that's good to see. Like, this is not a topic that we want to just kind of remain in the hidden parts of society. We want to be talking about abortion like it is a normal thing, because it is. But I think the other thing to say as well is that when you look at the abortion stories that are centered, when you look at a lot of the response to abortion and abortion access, it is still quite, how can I say this? It is still quite centered around white feminism and specific bodies and their access to abortion. So I think for me, as much as I was grateful to see people talking about abortion, I was still kind of seeing in those conversations this reinforcing really of hierarchies about whose stories do we need to think about, whose care do we need to think about, and whose care can we afford to quote unquote ignore or not think about or not consider. And I think as well, it's important to also recognize that particularly in the context of the United States, abortion is not something that has ever been accessible for everyone. And there are community groups like Sister Song, Black and Brown led community groups that have been preparing for the overturning of Roe v. Wade for years, that have been supporting community members who simply cannot access these things, regardless of whether or not it's legal in their states. And I think you know, some of the panic that maybe has happened with Roe v. Wade kind of contradicts a lot of the work that they do. And I think we can definitely take some kind of inspiration from how calmly they've handled this situation, and you know how they very much kind of play the long game rather than looking for kind of short solutions to actually things that are built, as I said earlier, on structures of oppression, really. And I think, you know, as with everything, when it re-enters mainstream discourse, we're left at a crossroads really about how we want to talk about abortion. So do we want to continue talking about abortion like it is a middle class cis white woman's problem? Or do we want to talk about abortion now in its entirety, bringing in other genders, bringing in other racial expressions, other racial identities, bringing in class and access to abortion, bringing in reproductive justice rather than just reproductive rights? And I'm hopeful that we can go beyond this kind of black and white perspective of what abortion is, and make sure that our conversations are more inclusive, so that when eventually, and I do believe this will happen, when eventually we are able to reinstate abortion access or abortion legislation, that we're able to do this in a way that takes care of people more so than it was before.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. It is just, as you say, it was a topic that there's been a lot of noise around it, and it's one of those things where it kind of goes through a bit of a change, like something happens and then loads of noise is made and then it goes quiet again, and until something else happens. And as you say, we're at that point now where it's starting to go quiet again, but we're like, this is the point now where we can make changes in how we talk about abortion. And I do still hear people, you know, even through that whole Roe v. Wade situation, where people are like, oh, but, you know, people have abortions for different reasons, and, you know, that reason's more important than that reason, or, you know, it shouldn't be like that. It doesn't really matter what the reason is, but you still have people thinking those ways. And yeah. I think there was a lot more, as you said a while back in this conversation, it's something that we need education on in all communities. It's still a stigma and still something where people have their biases about it in all communities. And it's something that we still need to do a lot of work around. So you had your safe space yesterday. Are you planning some more? I know we're planning to do some work together. So we're going to hopefully do some collaboration between community cultures and Adia, and we're going to do some safe spaces for Muslim communities. But yeah, just what do you have in your plans a bit apart from the safe spaces, or is that what you're focusing on now for the immediate future?
Yeah, so I think the safe spaces are definitely going to be something that we do long term. I think with kind of how support groups often are, or just kind of having community spaces, it's best when they're offered for as long as possible. I think abortion care, particularly with how we deal with abortion care in Western medicine, is very much getting the person to access the procedure, access the medication, and then as soon as it's done, it's done. Whereas actually abortion care, we want to be continuous. And I think for me, it's important to reflect that in the work that we do. You know, we're going to be here for as long as people are having abortions and need the support, which is probably going to be forever. And I think as well, we've had a lot of requests for kind of more educational work as well, which has been really interesting to see. A lot of abortion practitioners are realizing that maybe the way that they were taught about abortion, or the way that they carry out abortion, that is usually decided by another body, but it's still something that they're part of, is not necessarily intersectional. And they want to include more people. They want to be more culturally competent in the work that they do. And that's definitely something that I'm really keen to explore, talking about what it would look like to have an abortion practitioner who is sensitive to your faith, who is able to incorporate your faith into the way that you access care. I think is something I'm really looking forward to doing in the future too. And then besides that, we also have an event coming up at the end of this month with Warsaw, I believe that's how they pronounce it, network. It's going to be a panel discussion with some incredible people from the Middle East and North Africa, talking about access to safe abortion there and some of the work that they've been doing for a really long time. I think for me personally, I want there to be like a decolonial body of power, and I want to instill that in all of our community members. And for me, part of that is decentering this kind of global North, this Western perspective. So talking about abortion care beyond borders and bringing in perspectives outside of just Europe and North America. So I'm really looking forward to some of this kind of international collaboration that we're going to do, listening to some of the people who've worked on the teams that have decriminalized abortion in certain countries and that have been supporting people access abortion in situations really, really different to how we do here. So that is the other kind of big event that we've got going on at the moment. Yeah.
Sounds amazing. You know, like, I can feel the enthusiasm from you and the absolute like power, like, and passion for the work that you do. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and for telling everyone about the amazing work that you do. I'm going to pop your handle into the description for this video, and any other links as well. And we will be collaborating, as I said, so look out for some spaces that are Community of Cultures and Adia. And yeah, so thank you so much for being here and sharing all of that with us. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.